This is NEA's premier ESP Professional Development Conference. Woohoo! And this one is extra special because this is the 25th anniversary of this conference. And how fitting that we have such a special guest to join us today. So, our special guest has already been in Tallahassee, Sarasota, St. Pete, and she made a stop at the Florida Education Association office already today. And when she leaves here, she's going to have more stops to make today. Our special guest, she's trying to do it all. Yeah, that's a woman for you, isn't it? Woohoo! Our special guest is a mother, a daughter, a wife. She's Secretary Hillary Clinton's #1 supporter and a political activist in her own right. She's the former special correspondent for NBC News. She currently works with the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton Global Initiative, where she is focused on improving global health, creating opportunities for women, and promoting economic growth. She serves on several boards to include Common Sense Media and an interactive corporation and a medical college board. She is the daughter of two of the biggest names in American politics, former President Bill Clinton and presidential nominee Hillary Rodham Clinton. But most importantly, she is our friend. Please join me in welcoming Chelsea Clinton to the stage.
Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Princess, for that really warm introduction. Thank you to Princess and Earl for the great hugs. Thank you, whomever decided to play Pharrell's Happy. That's my daughter's favorite song, so that was just so fun for me. Although I stood, admittedly, behind the curtain while Princess was speaking, I now am going to sit. And please know that I'm sitting because I'm pregnant, and it's not a reflection on my gratitude for the NEA inviting me today or my enthusiasm for being with all of you this afternoon. But I just hear my doctor's voice in my head telling me to sit down. I am so grateful to the NEA for your strong support of my mom's campaign. I think this is the most important presidential election of my lifetime. And I feel that way for a couple of reasons. The first is a deeply personal one. This is the first time I will be voting as a mom. And I didn't know I could care any more about politics or who is running for or holding political office until my husband and I were blessed with our daughter Charlotte, who is now 17 months old, or hopefully going to welcome an equally healthy and happy little sister or little brother for her this summer. Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's so nice. Thank you. I grew up going to political events, going to rallies and organizing events, volunteering in campaigns for my dad when he was running for governor, but also for whomever my parents were supporting who was running for the school board or running for the mayor of Little Rock or running to represent Arkansas in the Senate or the House, and of course whomever was running for president. And yet this election feels so much more fundamental to me because I know whomever we elect will play a profound role in shaping the country and the world and really the future that my children and their generation will grow up in. And the second reason that I think this is the most important election of my lifetime is because I worry that everything I care most about is at risk. And I feel that way kind of when I look at really any issue that we're facing in our country.
And so while I'm so proud and grateful to be my mother's daughter, and particularly now that I'm a working mom, I'm so proud and grateful for the example that she gave to me as a working mom, as someone who always shared with me kind of what she was fighting for, why she was working so hard, and yet I never doubted I was the single most important person in the world to her. I see this election very much through the prism of being a parent myself and thinking about what matters most to me as a mom. And so it matters to me that my mom has been fighting for education her whole life, and that she knows education doesn't start in kindergarten, it starts around now. It's one of the reasons that she's always fought for paid maternity leave, because she knows how important those early months are for a mother's health, but also for a child's long-term health. The children that are able to bond with their parents in the early months, weeks, even days of life are much more likely to be healthy, happy, and successful later in life. When my mom got pregnant with me, she was working at a law firm that didn't have a maternity leave policy because no one who had ever gotten pregnant had ever come back to work full-time after giving birth. So she had to write her firm's maternity leave policy. She gave herself and other expectant mothers 4 months of paid time off as new moms, and she became an advocate for maternity leave, and she pushed my father, as he gives her full and fair credit, to make Arkansas the first state in the South to give paid maternity leave to state employees. And so that matters to me. It matters to me that some of my earliest memories are listening to my mother talk about her efforts to bring the first public early education programs to Arkansas, to help parents understand that each of us are our child's first educator, to help children have access to high-quality daycare and early childhood and development programs that then help them succeed when they get to kindergarten. It matters to me that I remember learning about legal aid when I was in kindergarten because my mom had started legal aid in Arkansas and later went on to chair the Legal Aid Services Corporation of America. And so the fights that my mom is engaged in this campaign, what really motivates her every day is I know the work of her lifetime. She is not new to the fight of paid family leave. She's not new to the fight of women's rights or equal pay for equal work. She's not new to the fight of ensuring that we value education and educators and recognize that education starts, again, right about now. And so I hope that that matters not only to people sitting in this room, but people across the country. That for my mom, it is more personal than it is political. As you may know, her first job out of law school was going to work for the Children's Defense Fund. And while she was at the Children's Defense Fund, she did kind of three main things. The first thing she did was she went to South Carolina, where she worked on and off for years to help get young men, all young men, admittedly, who were trapped in the adult prison system into the juvenile system, partly for their own safety, but also so that they could access their constitutional right to an education and have at least the chance of getting out when they turned 18. She went to Alabama to expose the segregation academies, the illegal efforts to reroute public funds to fund all white schools, even 20 years after Brown v. Board of Education. And she worked with a team across the country to figure out why so many kids weren't in school. And what they found was that a lot of kids then weren't in school because of mental and physical disabilities. And then a lot of the kids in the early 1970s who weren't in school with mental disabilities were victims of lead poisoning. So what's happening in Flint, as well as what's happening in Philadelphia and Cleveland and Baltimore, Newark, and elsewhere across our country is deeply personal to my mom because it's an area that she's been working on for a long time. And it's partly why when she was in the Senate, She fought to give the Department of Education the authority to provide funding directly to districts that have a high percentage of Title I schools, so that financing can never be an excuse to not support the work that all of you do every day, and to support our children to be able to learn in any environment that I know all of us would hope for. Because when we look at Flint, what we see is that there's one school nurse in the whole school district. There are no more social workers, and there's one school guidance counselor. Right? No good, and that's putting it mildly. So we know we need to do more to support women, families, and most of all, our children. This has been my mother's life calling, and as someone was saying to me backstage, she does indeed know that it takes a village. And you are part of our family's village, you are part of our children's village, and you all deserve all of our respect, but also resources, so that our village can be all that we would hope for any of our children. So I just really wanted to come and say thank you on a personal level, share a little bit about why this election is so important to me, even more so as a mom than as a daughter, and just really to say thank you to NEA and to all that you're doing with my mother's campaign. We couldn't do this work without you, and I know we're all incredibly grateful. So I have a little time to answer questions, if there are any questions, either for me or about my mom's campaign, or if any of you have parenting advice. You laugh, but I sometimes get great advice, particularly from anyone who's made the transition from 1 to 2 children. I know what I don't know. I've never been a mom of 2 before. I would really welcome any wisdom that you might want to share, but also equally welcome any questions you might have. But again, just thank you all so very much. Earl, I don't hear. We can share a microphone, Earl.
You're good.
We can share. We can share.
Is that all right? Yes, sir. So just to be close to you, I want you to be very comfortable. I want you to breathe. I want you to just have a, okay. So I want you to have a good experience at the NEA ESP conference, and we're delighted that you're here. So we do have some questions, and we're going to start right down here.
Hi, Chelsea.
Hello, sir.
My name is Kevin Gilbert. I'm a member of the NEA Executive Committee from Mississippi, and I have with me Miss Doreen McGuire-Grigg from California. She would like to ask you a question.
Yes, sir. Hello,
Hi.
ma'am.
Hi, Chelsea. I'm a special education paraeducator in California. I've been doing it for 29 years now. And I also serve on the board of directors for my state at the NEA level. And my question is, what would Secretary Clinton do when she's elected president
Knock on wood.
to ensure that her U.S. Department of Education provides programs and services that elevate education support professional careers?
I think it's such an important question, and I would say a few things in reaction. I think part of the answer is what I mentioned earlier, ensuring that particularly in states like California, where the discrepancy between Title I and non-Title I schools is vast, using the Department of Education to help level that playing field. This is something that she fought for when she was a senator. She believes it's something the president may be able to do through executive action, where the Department of Education could provide funding directly to both districts and schools. This is another area where raising the minimum wage is important, but also ensuring equal pay for equal work. And at least from my perspective, my mother's the only candidate on either side of the aisle that I hear consistently talk about equal pay for equal work. Because if we raise the minimum wage and that has an upward ricochet effect, but we're not paying women equally, then that's still devaluing women's work, and that's not only not good for women today, that's not good for families, and that's also not good for women over time. Because if women aren't paid equally over time, that means Social Security payments will be lower. later in life. So this is not only an issue that's relevant today, it's really relevant over a woman's lifetime. So I would say kind of all of that together I think would make a big difference in what you're talking about. And the second kind of point that I would make is something that my mom worked to do in the Senate was to have more research dollars invested, not only in understanding mental health, including understanding what causes or aggravates autism, but also how best to treat autism and how best to support children who are on the spectrum. Because most of research that is done on kind of what causes autism or mental health challenges. And there's not enough research yet on what actually works to support children and then adults with autism to lead lives of dignity and to be able to be contributing members of society, whether that's when they're in school, when they're in work, whether they can live alone or not, and how best to provide supportive environments. And I think that will really matter over the long term to your work as well. So thank you for asking your question, and even more, thank you for what you do.
All right, thank you very much. Now we have Ms. Debbie Chandler from Washington. She also serves as president of our National Council of Education Support Professionals.
And she has her own
And
cheering
she has her own cheering session. She has a question for you as well.
Hi, Chelsea. What will Secretary Clinton do to keep private contractors out of public schools, especially as it relates to ESP careers?
So this is another reason, candidly, why unions are so important and why the Supreme Court is so important. And I think this is a big difference, not to be too political, but this is a big difference between my mom and her opponent, who tends to view the Supreme Court through the lens of campaign finance reform. And that's hugely important. And I think it's hard to argue my mom doesn't have a personal interest in overturning Citizens United, given that Citizens United was an organization set up with one purpose, to derail her 2008 presidential campaign. So she has a personal interest in overturning Citizens United, as well as clearly an ethical and an American interest. But the Supreme Court is important for so much more, alongside and in addition to campaign finance reform. And we see that in what's just happened in the last few months when it comes to workers' rights and unions. So one of the reasons we need a president who understands that we don't live in a single issue country is because of the Supreme Court. And I certainly hope the Senate does its job and gives whomever President Obama nominates a full and fair hearing. But we know that this will be an issue again for the next president, because if you look at the average age on the Supreme Court and the average age historically at which justices have retired, the next president may appoint an additional 1, 2, or even 3 more justices to the court. And so if you care about voting rights, or you care about workers' rights, or you care about unions, or you care about gun control, or you care about climate change, or you care about a woman's right to choose, or women's health, and the list just goes on, you have to care about the Supreme Court. So I think that that is a big difference, and I think that should kind of really matter when people are looking at this election, and that wouldn't, for my mother, only be about the Supreme Court, would also be about the National Labor Board and how she thinks about everything that affects what all of you here do and stand for and fight for, because ultimately that's in all of our interest for you to be successful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Chelsea. My name is Maury Kaufman, a member of the NEA Executive Committee from the great state of Michigan. With me is Linda Estrada from Texas with our next question.
I've got my own group with me.
Yes, ma'am. I hear that. Yeah, hello.
Hi, Chelsea. I am a campus secretary in Donna, Texas, and I know a lot of ESPs, both back home and across the country, have to work multiple jobs in order to survive. What is Secretary Clinton's plan to ensure a living wage?
So I think it's such an important question because it's one that's relevant not just to you and the people that you work with and work alongside, but it's relevant to our country. And for me, this is a real question of values, right? We should value work that we find valuable. I think that should be a pretty simple premise. So raising the minimum wage is clearly part of that. The last time the minimum wage was raised was in 2009, and then indexing the minimum wage to inflation so that it isn't effectively demoted in value over time, ensuring that we're holding states and cities accountable to that, ensuring that the minimum wage is applicable to everyone. For example, at the moment, it is legal to pay people with disabilities less than the minimum wage. Yes, that is legal in our country. That's something my mom tried to get changed when she was in the Senate, and she didn't succeed then, but increasingly there is even bipartisan support for the recognition that that is structural discrimination and needs to be changed in our country. So there's a lot that we need to do, but starting with raising the minimum wage and then protecting the minimum wage is a huge part of that. Another part of that is finishing the work of the Affordable Care Act and ensuring that states, including Florida, that haven't yet extended Medicaid to everyone do so, and also lowering the costs in the system. So capping out-of-pocket expenses, capping premium expenses, and finishing the work that my mom started more than 20 years ago to empower Medicare to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies. Because that's not only good for people on Medicare, it's good for the rest of us, because it'll be hard for drug companies to look us in the eye and charge us even 3 times, much less 300 or 3,000 times what they're charging someone on Medicare. So it's not only about raising the minimum wage, it's about recognizing that we need to control the costs that affect still too many people and claim too much of anyone's income. And I think, again, that's something my mom really understands, that raising the minimum wage and equal pay for equal work and enforcing the minimum wage and protecting the minimum wage is important, but not enough. We have to do more to lower the costs of living in America, including as it relates to healthcare. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful, and thank you, Chelsea. We know you're on a tight schedule. We can't thank you enough for being here, but I believe with the amount of time that we have, this is probably going to be our last question. So I introduce to you Hasheen Wilson from OH.
That was so much fun.
Yeah, it was.
You know, I'm not going to think about you. So my husband loves football so much, and so our whole lives in the autumn are organized around like the football schedule.
Yeah.
Admittedly, he's a Philadelphia Eagles fan because he's from Philadelphia.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not going to think about you whenever I watch the kind of little, the sweet, they're like 350-pound, like large professional athletes. But the little pictures of the men when they say where they went to school and when they say the Ohio State University,
right.
You are now going to be the background music in my head with the OH and the Ohio. So
right.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
I'm not going to think about you a lot every autumn.
Okay. So Chelsea, I'm a network administrator back in Ohio. Also, I'm in the ESP board of directors. And you being a mother, if you could fast forward to your daughter Charlotte's first day of school, how would you envision ESPs contributing to her success?
Wow, I haven't even thought about her first day of school yet, admittedly. Wow, I mean, that's like really kind of giving real meaning and great heart palpitations to when people say it goes by so fast. Because I met an adorable 3-month-old little boy last night in Jacksonville, and I had a flashback to when my daughter was 3 months old, and it was the first time I really felt on just kind of such an emotional level what people say, that it goes by so quickly. So admittedly, I'm trying to hold on and treasure every moment, but I'm going to try to put myself mentally forward. I certainly hope that she goes to, and I'm planning on it because thankfully I live in New York City, pre-kindergarten. And by the time that my daughter gets there, we will have universal pre-kindergarten in New York City, thanks to our mayor. You can applaud for that. I think that's terrific, and I think it also proves that we can get to national pre-kindergarten. I mean, if we can do this quickly in New York City, we can do it quickly at a national level, and this is another fight that my mom has been engaged in for a long time. So if I think about my daughter walking into pre-kindergarten, deep breath, I hope that there is someone smiling there to greet her, because my daughter says hello even at 17 months to everyone, and it is fascinating who says hello back, admittedly. The people who, because she smiles, she goes, hello, and the people who say hi back, and the people who ignore her. So I certainly hope when she walks in the door, whomever she sees, and admittedly all the schools that we could possibly go to are within walking distance, so we would walk there. We wouldn't have to take a cab or a bus or the subway, so walking to school, and I hope whomever's standing at the door greets her with a smile. I hope whomever's standing there makes her feel safe and secure and welcome. I hope that that feeling then carries through her whole day. And I hope that's true of everyone that she meets. And for that to be true, I know that everyone that she meets has to feel good about where they all are on that day. I think that's one of the reasons it's so important that those of us who don't do what you do support you in doing what you do, because I know that affects our children. So thank you for asking your question. And I found that quite an anxiety-producing moment to think about kind of 3 years down the road. And admittedly, now I'm going to go back to thinking about her as a 17-month-old. But thank you for asking that, because I think, candidly, that's a question every parent should be asking ourselves, because it should matter to us on a deep and profound level how our children are treated, as well as what they're learning. So thank you for your question, and
My
thank you for
pleasure.
the Ohio.
You know, I want you to do me a favor. Yes, sir. I can remember when there were children at my school that didn't have insurance. And they couldn't go to the doctor, and they couldn't go to the dentist. But because of your mother, they got insurance. And, excuse me, I'm back now. And because of that, I will be forever thankful. And I'm with her, and I'll always be with her, and I'll always do everything that I can to be with her. And I want you to thank your mother for putting the interest of children and families first in this country.
Thank you, Earl. Thank you.